September. Your garden is still a riot of colour, but your hands are itching to grab those pruning shears. It feels like the ideal time to tidy things up, trim back the excess, and prepare your plants for winter. But hold on. Right now, a single wrong move could cost you next year's harvest and those beautiful blooms. Today, we're going to talk about autumn pruning, or more specifically, which trees and shrubs you should absolutely avoid pruning in September. And I promise, by the end, you'll understand the biggest mistake almost every other gardener makes. And it's not just about picking the wrong plant. So, why is September such a tricky month for pruning? It all comes down to biology. Plants, just like us, are getting ready for winter. They're slowing down all their processes and entering a dormant state. Any pruning is a stressor and a signal for action. The plant thinks, aha, I'm wounded. I need to grow new branches right away. And it expends its last reserves of energy on this new growth. But these young, tender shoots simply won't survive the first frosts. As a result, you won't just fail to help the plant, you'll actually weaken it considerably. It's like forcing an athlete to run another marathon immediately after crossing the finish line. So the first and biggest mistake gardeners often make concerns our beloved spring flowering shrubs. Here's a simple, yet ironclad rule to remember. Everything that blooms profusely in spring and early summer sets its flower buds on last year's growth. Imagine your shrub, already in late summer and early fall, right after its bloom, started preparing for the next season. It's already packed its bag, so to speak. Within each tiny bud on its branches, a miniature dormant flower is already tucked away. It's simply biding its time, waiting for the first warm rays of spring to burst into bloom. Then, along you come in September, pruners in hand. What happens? You're not just trimming an extra branch. You're ruthlessly cutting away all of next year's bloom, all that beauty for which we plant these shrubs in the first place. The ideal time to prune these shrubs is immediately after they finish blooming in the spring. This gives them an entire season to grow new shoots and properly set their flower buds for the following year's display. And the first and most frequent casualty of that autumn pruning impulse is the forsythia. That's right, it's that very bush that's the first to burst into a glorious cascade of gold, often before other trees have even begun to leaf out. It's a true harbinger of spring. Now picture this. Throughout September, you walk past this bush, noticing its sprawling branches, and you think to yourself, I really should give it a good trim, make it look tidier. So, you grab your pruners and snip away all that glorious sunny display it's been preparing for you for almost half a year. Every single twig that looks a bit extra to you right now is already packed with developing flower buds. Pruning forsythia in September quite literally guarantees that come spring, you'll be staring at a mass of bare green sticks instead of that magnificent golden cloud. It's one of the most frustrating mistakes, precisely because the consequence only becomes clear 6 months down the line when there's nothing left to do. Want to experience that breathtaking fireworks display of yellow blooms? Then simply leave your forsythia alone until next summer, right after it finishes blooming. That's the perfect time to give it a trim. Next up, a beloved favourite and the true queen of the May garden, the lilac. Who can resist its intoxicating fragrance and those lush, heavy clusters of blooms? Yet many gardeners make a crucial mistake when it comes to these beautiful shrubs. If you dream of your garden awash in a fragrant purple haze next May, then step away from your pruning shears right now. All of next year's potential blooms are already formed as buds on the old growth from last season. Every cut you make now means sacrificing one, or even several, of those fragrant flower clusters you'd otherwise enjoy. You're quite simply robbing yourself of that beautiful display. Lilac, much like forsythia, should only be pruned after it has finished blooming. This is the ideal time to deadhead the spent blooms, which prevents the bush from putting energy into seed production and allows you to thin out the canopy for better air circulation. This encourages new growth, when next year's flower buds will then develop. So for now, simply admire the shrub's elegant form and eagerly anticipate that glorious spring fragrance. This same principle applies to spring-flowering spirea, especially its popular varieties, which burst into spectacular cascades of white blooms each spring, resembling frothy white fountains. These delicate white cascades only form on the branches you leave untouched this autumn. Every snip of your pruners now will result in a noticeable gap in that beautiful floral waterfall next year. Spirea, like its fellow early bloomers, sets its flower buds on last year's growth. By now, it's already fully prepared for next spring's show. By interfering with this process, you're essentially robbing yourself of that breathtaking beauty. So, if you dream of seeing this white wonder in your garden, you'll need to be patient. All major pruning, whether for shaping or rejuvenation, should only be done after the very last white petal has fallen to the ground. For now, the absolute most you should do is carefully remove any obviously broken or diseased branches and nothing more. Another popular resident of our gardens, the weigela, also finds itself on the list of plants to avoid pruning in the fall. Its vibrant bell-shaped flowers, which range from delicate pink to deep purple, all develop on last year's wood. A September trim, even if you just think you're tidying up its shape, will actually leave you without any blooms next season. Weigela, especially its hybrid varieties, blooms incredibly profusely. However, all this splendour is already pre-programmed within its branches. Intervening in autumn is like erasing a part of that programme. The plant will expend energy healing its wounds and might even try to put out new shoots, which won't have enough time to mature before the first frost anyway. Ultimately, you'll end up with a weakened bush and a complete absence of those vibrant, bell-shaped blooms that so beautifully adorn the garden in early summer. Therefore, with weigela, stick to the familiar rule: prune strictly after it has finished flowering. Rounding out our top 5 spring flowering beauties is deutzia, with its delicate, often double blooms resembling a scattering of stars. This graceful shrub adheres to the same crucial rule: do not prune it in the fall if you wish to see its magnificent display next season. Deutzia, like all our previous stars, sets its flower buds in advance on the growth it produced this year. By now, it has already fully prepared for its glorious spring show. Any attempt to improve its appearance with your pruners will result in only one thing. Next year, you'll be admiring nothing but foliage. This is particularly disappointing because while deutzia's bloom is fleeting, it is incredibly showy. Therefore, to ensure you don't miss out on this spectacle, just resist the urge to prune it in the fall. The only time to prune deutzia is after it has completely finished flowering. Now let's talk about some of the more finicky and demanding beauties, the ones that are far less forgiving of mistakes. We're talking, of course, about rhododendrons and azaleas. For these plants, fall pruning isn't just a risk of losing out on those gorgeous blooms. It's a serious threat to the health and even the life of the entire plant. The thing is, rhododendrons are incredibly slow to heal their wounds. Any cut made in the fall is an open invitation for infections, especially fungal ones, which thrive in the damp, cool autumn environment. While the plant struggles to heal, it expends precious energy that it desperately needs to successfully get through winter. What's more, their flower buds are large, very noticeable, and form right at the tips of the shoots. Cutting them off in the fall is essentially willingly sacrificing those magnificent floral displays. Pruning rhododendrons should only be done if absolutely necessary, for example, to remove dead or damaged branches, and when you do, always do it in the spring, before the plant's active growth period begins. Let's turn our attention to the queen of the garden, a plant that shows no mercy for pruning mistakes. We're talking about the big leaf hydrangea. It's crucial to specify the big leaf variety, also known as the mophead hydrangea. These are the ones with those enormous, lush clusters of blue, pink, or purple flowers. Its main characteristic, and simultaneously its biggest challenge in care, is that it blooms on old wood, specifically on last year's growth. All those magnificent flower buds are already formed in the stems by autumn. If you pick up your pruners and cut back its stems now, you are absolutely guaranteed not to see any flowers next year. You'll simply be snipping off all the future blooms. At best, you'll end up with a beautiful green shrub. So remember this golden rule. Never prune your big leaf hydrangea in the fall. The only thing you can do is remove any faded spent flowers to prevent them from breaking branches under the weight of snow. And that's it. No shortening, no shaping, no major cuts whatsoever. This is one of those cases where the best thing you can do is truly nothing at all. Now let's turn our attention to the orchard. As autumn pruning there can also cause considerable harm. This is especially true for stone fruit trees, particularly sour and sweet cherries. In September, their growth processes haven't fully concluded, and sap flow, although slowed, hasn't completely stopped. Any cuts made during this period heal very poorly and slowly. The cut surface becomes sticky and moist, turning into an ideal breeding ground for fungal diseases like brown rot or shot hole disease. A tree already weakened after fruiting simply doesn't have enough strength to effectively resist infection. As a result, instead of helping the tree, you create an open invitation for diseases that can cause serious damage or even kill it over winter. Therefore, any pruning of cherries and sweet cherries is best postponed until early spring, before sap flow begins. Plums and cherry plums are also highly susceptible to this particular risk. These trees are prone to an unwelcome phenomenon called gummosis. It's essentially the tree's defense mechanism against any injury, including pruning cuts. From the wound, a thick, sticky, resin-like fluid, known as gum, begins to exude, and nothing triggers this process, quite like autumn pruning, especially when done in damp, cool weather. Instead of focusing on storing nutrients and getting ready for winter, the tree channels its vital energy into weeping from these wounds. With this gum, it loses valuable carbohydrates, proteins, and other essential elements. Extensive and prolonged gummosis can severely weaken the tree, reducing its frost resistance and ultimately diminishing future yields. Therefore, to avoid making your plums or cherry plums weep and drain their strength before winter, it's best to keep your pruners put away until spring. Apricots and peaches, especially outside of truly warm climates, are delicate, warm weather plants. Their successful survival through winter directly depends on how strong and healthy they are when they enter the colder months. Any weakening can prove fatal. Untimely pruning, in particular, is a major source of stress for these trees. Like other stone fruit varieties, they heal poorly from cuts made in autumn and are highly susceptible to gummosis. But for apricots and peaches, this risk is even greater. A weakened tree becomes an easy target for frost. Even minor bark damage can lead to entire branches, or even the whole tree, freezing and dying. Therefore, remember this crucial rule. Never experiment with autumn pruning for apricots and peaches. All necessary shaping and corrective pruning should be performed exclusively in spring, once the threat of severe frosts has passed and the tree is full of vigour, ready to heal its wounds quickly. Now let's talk about evergreens. You might think these tough, resilient plants could easily handle an autumn trim, right? But conifers are a whole different story, with their own strict rules. The most crucial point to remember, once and for all, is this. They don't regenerate new growth on old, woody parts of their branches. Unlike deciduous trees, they lack dormant buds on their trunks and older branches. This means if you cut a branch back too far, into the bare wood, new needles will never grow there again. You'll be left with an unsightly bald patch in the canopy that you'll either have to hide or wait years for surrounding branches to fill in. Therefore, any heavy, drastic pruning of conifers in autumn, just as they're preparing for dormancy, is strictly forbidden. Pines and spruces require particular caution. Because they grow so slowly, any pruning mistake will be visible for decades. These trees feature what are known as whorls, formations where several branches emerge from a single point on the trunk, creating a distinct tier. If you cut one of these branches completely, flush with the trunk, a significant wound will form that will never properly heal. Furthermore, pruning them in autumn can trigger excessive resin flow. Instead of preparing for winter frosts, the tree will divert valuable resources to healing the wound. While some shaping techniques like candle pinching, removing young shoots to encourage denser growth, are used for pines and spruces, These are typically performed in late spring to early summer. Autumn is definitely not the time for such tasks. In autumn, the most you should do is carefully remove any dead or broken branches. Arbor vitae and junipers are likely the most common plants for topiary in our gardens, but even these popular choices have specific considerations when it comes to autumn care. In September, you should only undertake very light, cosmetic pruning. This means removing any isolated dry branches within the canopy or lightly trimming tips that are just breaking the desired shape. However, any significant structural pruning, anything that removes more than a third of the plant's green foliage, must wait until spring or early summer. And why is that? First, cuts made on arbor vitae in autumn can turn brown, ruining the aesthetic of your hedge or sculpted form. Second, aggressive pruning is a significant stressor for the plant. The plant will divert its energy into recovery, leaving it weakened and less prepared for winter, especially if the season is harsh and snowless. Therefore, if you're planning a major transformation for your arbor vitae or juniper, it's best to postpone those plans until spring. And let's not forget about vertical gardening, the beauty of climbing plants. Among these, the clematis truly stands out, but it demands a unique approach. We're specifically talking about those in pruning group 1. These are the varieties that bloom profusely in spring and early summer on last year's growth. Examples include the beautiful alpine and Montana clematis. When they flower, it's an absolute explosion of blossoms, completely covering the vine. And the groundwork for this stunning display is being laid at this very moment. If you go in and prune these shoots in the autumn, thinking you're just tidying things up, you'll be met with nothing but bare stems come spring. You'll simply deprive yourself of that first, most abundant and truly spectacular flush of blooms. Clematis in this group are either left unpruned entirely, perhaps with just a very light tidy up to remove any dead or damaged growth, or they are shaped immediately after their blooming period has finished. In autumn, the only thing you should do is carefully take them down from their supports and lay them under protective cover, but keep those secateurs far away. Even grapevines, which you might think are ready for full pruning, should actually be left alone in September. Yes, they do need to be pruned in the fall, but not just yet. Throughout September and even into October, vital processes are taking place within the vine. The nutrients built up in the leaves throughout summer need to completely transfer into the perennial wood and roots. This process is called cane ripening, and it's essential for the plant's winter hardiness. If you prune prematurely, while the vine still has green leaves, you'll rob the plant of vital nutrient reserves. The vine will enter winter weakened and could simply freeze to death. The ideal time for pruning grapevines is after the first hard frosts when all the leaves have dropped. This is a clear signal that the plant has fully prepared for dormancy. But what about roses, you might wonder? Countless articles have been written about autumn rose pruning. However, there's a crucial detail here that many often miss. While roses are indeed pruned in autumn, this type of pruning differs significantly from spring pruning. In autumn, we're only doing a light, sanitary cleanup. What exactly does that entail? We clear away all remaining leaves, as they can be a breeding ground for fungal diseases. We also trim off any spent blooms and those thin, red, immature shoots. These won't survive the winter and will only drain the plant's resources, but no drastic shortening cuts whatsoever. Cutting roses back severely in September will only signal them to start new growth. They'll produce tender new shoots that will simply die off with the first frosts. All main structural and shaping pruning of roses should only be done in spring, after you've removed their winter protection, and can properly assess how the canes have overwintered. When it comes to many ornamental grasses, such as miscanthus, calamagrostis, or molinia, it's best to leave them standing until spring. Throughout autumn and winter, their dry plumes and foliage create beautiful architectural interest in the garden, looking especially striking when adorned with a dusting of frost or snow. They bring much needed texture and life to the landscape when most other plants are looking their most dormant. But their appeal goes beyond mere aesthetics. Their dense clumps provide a natural haven for beneficial insects, offering them crucial shelter throughout the winter months. Moreover, their existing foliage acts as a natural mulch, protecting the grass's root crowns from freezing solid. If you cut them back to the ground in the fall, you'll expose their delicate root crowns, making them vulnerable to damage during a harsh, snowless winter. Therefore, the best time to prune these grasses is in early spring, just before new growth begins to emerge. The same advice applies to the popular tall sedums, also known as stonecrop. They truly shine in the autumn. Their large, flat-top flower heads, which were green or pink throughout the summer, gradually transform by September into rich, deep wine red or even brownish tones. These structures hold their form incredibly well, adding beautiful interest and shape to the garden through fall and into winter, especially when lightly covered with snow. Those dark, persistent seed heads create a striking contrast against the white snow, making them truly stand out. But their benefits aren't just decorative. They also serve a practical purpose, acting as markers to show you exactly where the plants are, preventing accidental damage during winter garden work. What's more, their hollow stems provide perfect overwintering spots for beneficial insects. So, there's no need to rush and cut them down. It's far better to save that job for early spring when you're doing your general garden cleanup. There's another crucial point to consider, and this one applies specifically to large trees, not just shrubs. We're talking about trees known for their vigorous sap flow in spring. Maples and birches are the prime examples. It's common knowledge that you should never prune them in spring, as they'll literally weep sap profusely. Consequently, many assume autumn is the perfect season for pruning these trees. While there's some truth to that, it comes with a significant caveat. Pruning them in autumn is indeed less harmful than in spring. However, September isn't quite the optimal time. The tree hasn't fully entered its dormant state yet, and wounds will heal more slowly than they would, for instance, in winter. Therefore, unless absolutely necessary, for instance to remove a hazardous, overhanging branch, it's wiser to delay pruning maples and birches until later. The ideal period is late autumn, early winter, once all the leaves have dropped and stable freezing temperatures have consistently set in. But now, let's get to the most important part. We've listed dozens of plants, but the biggest secret and the most common mistake of fall pruning isn't what you cut, but why you're doing it. In the fall, a gardener should have only one pruning goal: sanitation. Remove anything diseased, broken or dead. That's it. Any other type of pruning, be it shaping, rejuvenating or thinning, stimulates new growth. And stimulating growth right before winter is like sending your plants into battle without their armour. This is the crucial realisation. The problem isn't your pruners, it's your mindset. Once you shift your goal from make it look good now to help it survive winter, everything falls into place. You start working in tandem with nature, not against it. So, let's recap. In September, keep your pruners away from spring flowering shrubs, stone fruit trees, most conifers and roses. Our only job is to help the garden go into dormancy healthy by removing only what's truly problematic. No beauty trims. Thanks for watching this video all the way to the end. I truly hope these tips help your garden survive the winter and greet spring in all its glory. If you found this helpful, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on more gardening advice. Now, a question for all of you. Be honest. What plants did you mistakenly prune in the fall, and what were the consequences? Share your experiences in the comments below. Let's learn from our mistakes together.